Thank you so much for this great presentation today. It's about the ESG and CSR and the principle responsible management. They are all important concepts. However, what we need to take into consideration on board, like such implementation, it's about open system platform of collaboration across different institutions cannot be viewed like a closed system. It's about open system where knowledge sharing is critical important aspects. You know what I mean? It's about collaboration partnership to achieve sustainable performance. And this is what I can say briefly. What's really important, we need to be aware of the pivotal role of the Industry 4.0 technology as enabler. Industry 4.0 technology help organization in terms of informed decision making. It's about the planning, optimizing customization regarding, customer requirement as well as end-to-end solution, including different various stakeholders, regardless whether this is different industry, high education industry, or banking system or manufacturing company. It's sustainability about a new system for our life. It's about value. It's about business ethics and moral issues in terms of the organizational performance. Okay, and this is what I can say briefly. Thank you so much, Professor Van. It was really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we have just the time for one question, either offline or we have already a question here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentations. I have one question for you. I read a report of Goldman Sachs last year, and it's estimate that there are about 300 million full-time jobs that are likely to be replaced by AIs, and it is equivalent to nearly 10% of the work labor force. And we can view this process as creative destruction for companies and economy as a whole. So can you briefly comment on this, how this process would happen, and how higher education in particular would adapt to this trend in the short run or and in the long run?
Thank you very much for that particular question. That's the fact actually that we think the world or the sectors actually, or some sectors actually have to accept. In that sense, with the advancement, that's why it's called disruption at first. With the disruption, technological disruption, things will change. It's no longer business as usual. Perhaps it's business unusual. But then again, we should go on with that, with what we have. So I would see that would happen or already happening in certain sectors which are very much labor intensive and becoming very much slowly become automated in that sense. But then again, you have to that is why, as I mentioned just now, education, higher education, especially plays a very significant roles in terms of taking part with this kind of transformation, and also at the same time produce the kind of graduates, the kind of specialized people that can further can be useful for the future sectors or the future. In that sense, we use a lot would lost their job because of the AI. Then again, we have our own human would have our own thing, of course, to do. It's just that this has been slowly to change the whole environment. Education would need to produce such a talent so that it'll be useful for the sectors for now, starting now and for the future itself. I think that's my response. I agree with you on the terms creative destruction by Schumpeter. and that might change because it's a new idea, new things, and actually that enhance further the country and productivity, and to push us further into what we want for sustainable development, not just for us, but for the future generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I apologize for all of you who have questions, but we need now to move to the next keynote speaker. So I would like first to thank Professor Evan Lau and Professor Fadi Al-Kahan. Thank you very much for the keynote speak and for the discussion. Thank you very much. And so now it's time to move to Professor Jonathan Batten, and the session will be chaired by Professor Issac Otchere. So, Professor Batten, are you here and connected? Perfect. So, Professor Batten, you have the floor until 10 for us. Thank you very much for being here and delivering this keynote speak.
Sorry, just to confirm, I have 20 minutes. Is that correct?
20 minutes so that we can have some time for questions.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
I thought, am I the chair for the session?
So, Otchere, sorry, I didn't see you. So I would like to introduce Professor Issac Otchere, who is going to chair the session and perhaps wants to say a word of introduction.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this keynote speaker session. It's my pleasure to chair this session. The way, I don't know how you want the session to be, questions and answers to be done, but I would like Professor Batten to, present his speech, and then after that we can open the floor for questions. However, if you feel the urge to ask him questions whilst he's presenting, by all means, you can do so by raising your hand, and those on Zoom, I'll be able to see you, but those in person, I wouldn't. Okay, so before he starts, just want, by way of introduction, I would like to say that for decades, environmental economists have studied climate issues. And until recently, much of the academic studies have remained outside of the traditional finance domain. And the reason for this state of affairs is that environmental concerns were not central to academic research in finance. But the climate crisis, as we have been experiencing, is affecting different sectors of the economies and every function of the financial system. And the magnitude of the climate crisis is forcing us, all of us, to rethink and refine our financial theories and practices. So it appears that finance, has come late to the party, but the research in this area is evolving. In the last few years, there has been an increasing number of finance research in this area. The top finance journals, JFE, and RFS have been publishing papers on climate finance. In this keynote speech, Professor Batten will be focusing on this line of research, especially research on SDGs in business and economics. And I'm sure he's going to argue for more business research on SDGs. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Batten to present his keynote speech. So let us welcome him with a round of applause, those in person and also those on Zoom. Professor Batten, we invite you to present your speech.
Thank you very much, Professor Cherry. And indeed, so I have actually presented something similar to this before, but what I have done is updated all the material. This is I've been plugging this story, as you're suggesting, for the last couple of years, and I think that it's very much the moment now for this research in this area. Okay, let me just share my screen, and probably as I share my screen and go full screen, I suspect I will lose the ability to see myself and the audience. Let me just try. No, I'm still here. That's good. All right, so thank you again for the organizers for asking me to attend this event. Unfortunately, I was not able to join you yesterday due to both teaching and meeting commitments here back in Melbourne. But I'm sure that you had an amazing time as the host. The University of Economics in Ho Chi Minh City, of course, is an amazing host. So thank you very much. So very quickly, what I'll do is quickly, and I've only got 20 odd minutes. So explore the importance of the UN SDGs. As Professor Otchere was saying, I'll be emphasizing the need for more business research. I probably won't have time to look at these case studies I've got, but I might be able to just show one or two slides, largely to do with net zero and green bonds, which highlight some of the practical aspects of research in this area, but also highlighting some of the limitations. And but nonetheless, of course, my view is that we need to do much more. So basically, the points that I'm making are that we have the UN SDGs, and there's an overlap between these and between the social development goals and the 3 pillars of ESG, which are very commonly considered in business economics and law. Increasingly, universities are now being judged on things such as an ESG score. Universities around the world are now, if you look at researcher profiles on various university websites, you will actually see, not at my university yet, but there are others that do, where the research that the published research is categorized as to whether or not it is targeting one or more of the UN SDGs. And the reason for that is that universities are also being ranked by the research that they're doing in these areas. So it's now becoming much more important. Nonetheless, if we look at the research in total, and as I mentioned, I've just updated the data to the end of June. The research is primarily in STEM, in science, and in engineering. So this is a big problem, I think. And part of the problem is that there is the work that is being done. While Professor Otchere did mention that the top journals in finance and economics are now taking papers, the bulk of the work has been done has been published in journals which are by most universities and by most ranking systems regarded as low rank journals. And one in particular is Sustainability, which is a journal that's attracted significant publications and yet is regarded as a problem journal, which I'll come to in a minute. So basically, the identification, motivation, all of this needs to be improved going forward. Okay. So the UN SDGs are these ones here on the right-hand side. And of course, a lot of attention is directed at the big ones, such as poverty alleviation, climate change, and so on. But there's more. And so there's lots of scope for engagement. Now, one of the key things here, of course, is that if you look at so surveys by, for example, KPMG have highlighted the importance that large firms, large multinational firms, are putting on these, and many of these firms are now clearly stating how they contribute to these in different ways. So UN SDG 8 and 12, as it turns out, are the ones that are most referenced by according to the KPMG by corporations, and that's the relationship between work and growth, and responsible consumption and production. So, by the way, on this point of responsible consumption, as a classroom exercise, I ask students who may be erring on the side of adopting certain principles with the food that they eat, for example, whether they also think the same way in terms of their investments. So, with the hypothetical example, if their very dear grandmother died tomorrow and left them with $1 million, it would be very sad, of course. But what would they do with the money? Where would they be putting the money? And it's an interesting question for younger people to actually be put in a situation where they may be where their own personal views may be challenged by other financial goals. So it's an interesting hypothetical. So basically, the UN SDGs are this way of transforming not just corporations, but societies and the planet. So it's a measure of where we are now to where we need to be. And so this is a standard transformation exercise. And so we need policy. So that's the big picture view, but we need specific policy about things such as investment, financing, management of risk, and as well as that product innovation. So what I'll do is try and map out where we now stand with respect to these. I will also highlight some of the research that is being done in this area, and I will rank the research based on citations as a way of coming up with a system of what is important and what is not. And if I have time, I'll provide these case studies, but I suspect I won't. But nonetheless, on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the at the national level, the sorts of projects that are being financed. And I just received information yesterday that the Asian Development Bank in this region is providing a $100 million UN SDG type facility. So there's a lot of work being done by the supranationals as well as national governments, where they're looking specifically at financing a project which is directly linked to the UN SDGs. So the problem, of course, is that, and this is an article in Nature, the impact of probably the most important of the UN SDGs is climate change. And this is a recent paper looking at the economic implications arising from climate change. And the point that they make, and I have it here, is that the world economy is committed to an income reduction of roughly 20%, damage of what they say is $6 trillion within the next 6 years, independent of future emissions choices. And so they're basically pointing out that the damage that is going to be done to the global economy is huge. But and that's even with what we're the best estimate in terms of adjusting for climate, which is this warming to 2%, 2 degrees centigrade. So the mitigation costs, of course, are trivial in comparison to the damage, but even then, there is still so much reluctance to move forward in these areas. And this is and it's not just this is another Nature paper just recently published, and this again this one here looks at from a region perspective and looks at GDP impacts. And there was a view that, well, like with climate change, the north will get warmer, Siberia will grow grapes, and so on. Like there will be positive economic benefits arising from in the north, and which may offset the negative effects in the south. But as it turns out, this article points out that that's indeed not the case, that all countries will face significant losses, including those in cooler climates. So really what I'm trying to say is that, okay, one could challenge this data, and certainly I hope that people will. But nonetheless, the key point is that as it now stands, we are facing losses at a global level of trillions of dollars unless we start doing something very, very quickly. So, and it's not just climate. If we look at this as a mapping from the UN of their 2023 progress and the damage. So at the moment, we're only on track to meet 15% of our SDG targets. And so what does that actually mean? We're sitting comfortably in a nice room. What does it actually mean? It means that roughly 2.2 billion people lack safe water and hygiene. There's 3.5 billion people lack sanitation, and that particularly targets women in the developing world. 3.3 billion people live in environments that are vulnerable to climate change. Mostly coastal cities, not just in the developing world, such as in Bangladesh, but also in Europe as well. So there's the impacts at the moment by not doing enough are already significant. And so progress to date is quite depressing. So if you look, this is again from the UN report, that they're the targets 1 to 17. I mean, the goals 1 to 17, and where we are, the green is whether there's been any significant progress, and you can see that there's been some progress in some areas, but in areas such as G8, G1, there's been very little progress. Or rather, it's been moderated. Don't forget that the single biggest impact in terms of poverty alleviation arises from the fact that China was able to move roughly 400 million people out of poverty over the last 20, 30 years. Were it not for China, we'd be looking at a much, much worse situation with respect to poverty. So with respect to the framework, so ESG is commonly used by investors and businesses, whereas the SDGs provide guidance for governments and organizations. And from your point of view as researchers, this is such a hot topic that wherever possible, you should be trying to create these connections. And certainly I am trying to do so in the work that I do. So as I mentioned, we're having conversations about impactful research, and universities, of course, are also trying to do this. And so the question is, can we align our research with ESGs? Should we be doing so? And what about if the work that we're doing doesn't align? Does it really matter? And other questions about how do we measure impact? What are governments, what are universities doing in terms of measuring impact, and should we be trying to pitch our work in this area or not? So all of these are personal questions, but the world nonetheless is moving on, and there are metrics being used and developed and ranking systems that are being rolled out worldwide, whether they be the Shanghai Type Index or the Times Index. But the fact is that the world, we are going to be measured in these ways, whether or not we want to or not. So one of the interesting things, again from a Nature paper, this is a couple of years ago, but it highlights what is quite clearly an interesting gap, is that, so on the right-hand side, you see the number of publications from low-income countries, and on the left-hand side, those from high-income countries. And what's really interesting from Nature's perspective, and the argument they're saying is we need to do the science today. We need to prioritize research in these areas. But they also point out that we need to prioritize that research in high-income countries, because if you look on the right-hand side, the bulk of this work is being done in the low-income countries, particularly China. So there is low-income per capita countries. So I'm not quite sure how this has come about, but the fact is that in recent years, this type of work has been shifted to the emerging world, where in fact the impact of the problems to do with the UN SDGs are probably more prominent. But let's look more specifically. So this is just using Scopus up until the 30th of June and referring to ESG, SDG, or SDG search terms, and we come up with roughly 18,000 papers, 19,000 papers. So this does show using those points or terms, not necessarily the term sustainability. You see that there is a dominance of work coming from the US and China, US and the UK, and from China, and to some extent Australia. All of the studies point out to the fact that there's been a surge in research, probably in the last 10 years. What are the sort of papers being cited? They tend to be science papers. So if you look at the top one, it's about social ecological systems. The next one is in Science, the journal Science, and then global environmental change. So they're the sort of papers that are attracting most of the citations. Number 6, interestingly enough, is a business journal, but that's in Strategic Management Journal, and that, as it turns out, is the most cited paper in this literature. but I'll come back to that in a minute. So if we focus a little bit more on the disciplines and look for keywords. So they're the sort of keywords that are coming out the most: governance, sustainable development, sustainability, climate change, environmental protection. They're some of the keywords. And the disciplines that focus in those areas are on the right-hand side. And so when I first started looking at this work, business management, accounting, and economics, econometrics and finance as sub-disciplines were way down the bottom, heavily dominated by environmental science and social science. So in the last couple of years, there has been a surge in publications in this area, in loosely the business areas. And I'll come to where that's publishing next. So the journal that attracts the bulk of this is in two journals: Sustainability and the Journal of Cleaner Production. Neither of those journals are used for promotion in any university that I know of, and in fact there is often some negative connotations attached to publishing in those top ranked journals there. The institutes that are publishing work, they're on the right hand side, and you can see that they're fairly mixed. And that's just simply because of and it's quite diverse, really. And I don't have a lot of time, so I'll keep moving. Now, one of the problems with the first journal on that list, Sustainability, is that it's an MDPI journal, and it's been listed as in Retraction Watch. I would certainly not recommend any young researcher to publish in that journal, and I'm sorry if that may upset people in the room. It has. I once thought about publishing in Sustainability a long time ago, but it is now a very high volume journal, and it has been. For example, in Finland they downgraded the journal to basically a pay-to-publish journal. So, to those of you who are interested in looking more in detail at where you should be publishing or not publishing, as the case may be, I would recommend you have a look at Retraction Watch, and they have a database. And I'll just have to move my screen a little bit, but you'll see that in the areas of business and economics, they've got 7,292 papers have been retracted, and they're on their database, and many of them actually in this area of sustainability. So let's have a look at sustainability. So it started with 101 papers in 2013, and it peaked in 2021. It's basically a highly profitable journal because they charge a submission for a article publishing fee of 2,400 Swiss francs. Young researchers in China who need to achieve a publication in an SSCI journal or an SCI journal to graduate from their PhD have often published their work in sustainability, but so too have many others. But nonetheless, the numbers of papers published in the journal have declined in recent years. The top journals, though, do attract a lot of citations. And early on, as I mentioned, they were leading the charge in areas such as Industry 4.0, circular economy, and the COVID impacts. So there's some of the main highly cited papers in that journal, according to Scopus. So what about papers in accounting, business, economics, and finance? How much time do I have?
I have been notified that
5 minutes.
Out of time.
Yeah, give me 5 minutes and I'll wrap up. So this is a list of the top 10 journals in accounting, business, economics, and finance. And this list here is the areas of publication and the funding from those journals. And I'll just move straight to my okay, here we are. Summary. So basically, there's been an increasing number of papers in business economics broadly defined that focus in the SDG space. The Journal of Clean Production and Sustainability have published many papers in this area. There've authors who have published in those journals have mixed publication experiences, and so I'd warn authors to be very careful about publishing in both of these journals. At the moment, both of those journals are not ranked well in the various lists that matter for promotion, and possibly if you want to move or change jobs. There's been, as I mentioned, there's been little take up generally of this work in what are regarded as the top journals in the discipline, though there has been, as Professor Otchere mentioned, some publications in the RFS in a special issue recently. This will change, of course, but if you look at any of the search terms, you will see that using any like green finance, sustainable finance, or related terms, you'll see that that none of those, the cited papers that will come up are not those in top journals. They're in, for example, finance research letters, maybe the Journal of Corporate Finance, and other well-regarded but not top journals. So, and that begs the question about why and this is, I'll just leave this here. Why does business economics and law not publish more work on SDGs? And that, I think, is one of the interesting questions. And that is really up to departments and universities to come to terms with. But it's just, the fact of the matter is that the standard interdisciplinary journals are not favoured for tenure and promotion. And that's it. So universities for tenure and promotion tend to focus on discipline-specific journals, and the work that's being done in these areas tends to be interdisciplinary. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. I really, really wish we had more time to,
that's all right.
And I initially thought that, your presentation is going to take about an hour. That's why I used a few minutes to do the introduction, but it's very interesting. As I said, I really wish we had more time for you to present, your research. So it's time, I'm here in Canada. It's Thursday, 10:50 p.m. and that's when we are supposed to, stop. So, but I will open the floor for just one question, if there is any. Does anybody have a question for Professor Batten?
Yeah, we have time for one question. So offline or online?
Again, thank you very much, Jonathan, for an interacting keynote speech. And thank you very much from University of Economic Ho Chi Minh City. On behalf of the University of Economic Ho Chi Minh City, I would like to express sincere thanks to you for being here in a very, very short notice. My apology for that. I have a question regarding to your speech. At the moment in our university, we consider publishing in SDG topic is something creating an impact to the society. So from the perspective of your of you as a senior academic and a senior editor, can you share your view on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vin. Yes, I think all universities are now looking to do more work, or all researchers, I think, are looking to do more work, but importantly, universities are more conscious of that work. So, for example, my university now is tracking papers where there is a clear target. If you look at in Australia, one of the big universities here is Monash University. If you go to the Monash University website and you look at researcher profiles, like any academic at all, they will, and you click on their name and you can click on their publications, you will see that every single publication is aligned with a specific UN SDG. And I think that is the trend worldwide. Now, why is Monash doing that? Because this is now important for ranking systems. So whether or not it's the FT or one of the Shanghai rankings or whatever, these ranking systems are now trying to capture the impact of your work. And one measure of impact is whether that work is being aligned to the UN SDGs. And so a very simple measure of this is if you're a university administrator, you have all of the publications in the current year, you work out which of these publications are in SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You then identify the citations to those publications. And so you can do two things. You can see whether or not there are gaps in the areas of the research. For example, maybe no one's doing work on SDG 10. But if you look at SDG 1 or 2, you find that work is attracting a lot of citations. And so if that's indeed the case, then university administrators are likely to say, yes, well, if I have $1,000, work in SDG 1 is going to have more impact than doing work on SDG 5, for example. And so I predict that you're going to see resource allocation within universities aligned with how they measure impact, whether it's through citations, media citations, or mentions and whatever. But this is definitely the trend. But what you're doing at University of Economics, I think is a great strategy, and I think it will bode well for the positioning of the university in the region going forward.
Thank you very much. I would like to bring the session to a close because we have concurrent sessions that actually 5 minutes behind starting time behind schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Batten, for your interesting presentation. Somebody asked whether your slides will be made available, but I'm sure Babajide, you may contact Professor Batten.
I'll put them through.
We'll be happy to answer your question. Right. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this session. This session is closed. Let's move on to the concurrent sessions. Okay.
Thank you very much. For those who are in the room, we are going to take a picture.
Yeah.
So would you mind perhaps moving to the stage for a
Thank you very much,
picture?
Jonathan.
Yeah, sure.
And
Thank
for
you.
Jonathan,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Otchere. Thank you, everyone.
So will we stay online for the picture, or is
Exactly.
that?
Yeah.
Right now,
If you could.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So would you mind, for those who are present, so the roomies to come on the stage, and for those who are on Zoom, we are going to keep the screen open to see all of you.
Please open your cameras. Em ơi, Bé Nhi, cái bạn chụp hình đó rồi. Thank you very much.
For attending.
all good? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So now time to move to the breaking rooms for the different parallel sessions. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think that is a great idea.